here is that, right from day one, when this violent incident erupted on 3rd May, I could see Dr. Noni having a good grasp of what is happening on the ground, and also interacting on media platforms. And I felt that he has a very good grasp of the issue, and besides the fact that he himself does a lot of kind of studies in the area concerned. So I felt he can do justice to today's talk. So welcome Dr. Noni to deliver your well talk.
Thank you, NIAS. Thank you, Dr. Jivallata. And I give my respect to fellow panelists and also the audience. I'm very delighted to be here, and it's a great honor, as the first speaker also said. And I'm quite impressed with the kind of concept note that was presented here by Dr. Jivallata. And I think Ravi Desai has already done part of my work. So I would try to narrow down on a couple of significant points that I think it is important to study. My paper is entitled as Ethnicity and Geopolitics, where I'm trying to look at the shadow of geopolitics on the ethnic relations in the region called India and Myanmar. To begin with the definition aspect of ethnicity, we can be reminded of what Paul Brass would say. He's of the view that there are 3 layers of struggles that ethnic groups normally have. One could be a struggle within a group. Second is a struggle between groups. And third is also very interesting, that's between the state and the dominant. And the other front of the third aspect is the struggle between the state and the dominant over a particular area or particular territory where there are resources. I'm not sure which segment of the struggle is going to be fitting into our case. But to be brief, I feel that ethnicity is something which is related to people who are having shared cultural and racial and different kinds of similar background. Particularly speaking from the perspective of language and ethnicity, I think Kukis and Métis do not have a big difference. However, political journeys of these identities have met and erected boundaries between them. And that is, I think, what is important to be unfolded here. So I want to begin by saying that, when I look at the non-Manipuri audience, I have this baggage, and I think people expect me to be speaking the voice of the Métis. And that's very unfair, I guess. And I see that the academics are actually divided on these 2 binaries, which is very unfair. When I see a Bihari scholar, I don't think he's going to represent Bihar in that way. Similarly, when a Manipuri or a Métis speaks, it should not be necessarily representing the views of Métis. So I would request the audience to be kind of open to engaging Métis scholars as somebody who is trying to be more in academic perspective, not representing his own community. So that's a very different struggle that we have had, because I've seen television talks, I've seen a lot of writings on the newspapers. I can see a lot of division has already happened in terms of ethnic identities, including the academic practices. So I would struggle to not get into that trapping. Just to start with, I also have a reservation, and I also have a complaint to share with you. That is, the Indian left liberal have committed mistakes by looking at the problem in Manipur as what you said, the minority versus majority, Christian versus Hindu. That is very, very painful, because the left liberals in India have largely applied their theoretical framework without really looking at the ground reality. And that has accentuated the problem, the ethnic tension in Manipur. And I can see my former fellow left colleagues, because I grew up in Delhi University and JLU, so I have the experience of being, acquainted with left politics. But I can see a lot of left activists jumping into the question, taking the framework of communism and trying to look at the issue. And that is very misleading sometimes. So therefore, that perspective, if we keep in mind, probably will give a better understanding of the problem that we have in Manipur. This is a second framework that I want to put forward. The third point that I want to raise is that there are 222 ethnic groups in the northeastern region of India. 222 ethnic groups, quite a lot. And there are nearly 300 dialects in the region. Now, having seen the kind of diversity, it is very natural to see a complicated relationship amongst them. And that has exactly happened in our side of the world. Now, I want to get back to a couple of frameworks that can help us to understand the problem. As you all know, Christopher Jeffrey has worked on this concept called ethnic democracy. And he is of the view that there is a rise of ethnic democracy in India. But quite reversal to this perspective of Jeffrey, I think in the Northeast, what we have seen is a rise of ethnic identities in the name of minority, thereby victimizing a lot of micro-tribes, micro-identities. By micro-identity, I mean the buffer tribes. Sometimes these tribes are defined as part of the Nile conglomerate, sometimes the tribes are defined as part of the Cookie conglomerate, so they are actually completely being victimized in the very process of resurrecting these bigger ethnic tribe identities. The present conflict in Manipur has witnessed these unfortunate trends of victimizing micro-tribes whose voice is not normally heard in the public sphere, also in the legislative assembly or democratic institutions. I can cite a lot of examples, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to name those smaller ethnic tribes. That will not be good here. So now I want to come back to the history of how the ethnic issues, proliferated in the region called India and Myanmar, because my topic is entitled as Ethnicity and Geopolitics. So therefore, I want to have a flip through these borderland politics, as Noni has started doing by talking about geopolitics. But I want to get into the ethnic side of the problem. In 1998, there was a book written called Zalangam. You can, people who are from Manipur or Northeast, you can note down this book and read it, please. There is a book published in 1998 called Zalangam. Zalang means free, Gam means land, free land. The whole idea of free land is related to the ethnic narrative that we have today and has caused a lot of tension in the region. Now, free land, I don't think it is land of freedom, but it is more of a free land where people keep moving from one side to the other. Now, this claim is being usurped, appropriated by university professors. I'm not going to name him. I can see a lot of narratives, a lot of books have been written on this, that we were and we are free moving people. Now, the question before us is, when you are a citizen of a particular state, when you are employed in the university, when your people of that particular ethnic group is identified with some state or the other in the world, how can you say that you are a free moving people? This very whole idea of claiming to be a free moving people in that region has ignited this ethnic conflict, and therefore I'll show you a lot of slides where ethnic conflicts have happened in the Northeast. Now, I want to debunk this very idea of free moving people because this has created a lot of problems, because when these narrative of free moving people comes up, there's an imagination of a greater homeland also. And this imagination for a greater homeland overlaps with the existing state systems and thereby causing a lot of ethnic tension. So, if I say my identity is a free moving identity, today I've come to Bangalore, and if I say my identity, my territoriality is going to be also including you in Bangalore, what would be your position? That creates an overlapping identity formation, which is a threat to the existing state systems and existing people. So therefore, this whole idea of appropriating free-moving people identity in the 21st century is obsolete, and it has to be revisited to bring better coexisting political ambience in the borderline called India-Myanmar region. I can give a lot of other examples. Of course, there is a statelessness if you look at the history of people in the region. I'm using the word statelessness. What does it mean? If you look at the situation of the Rohingyas, they have fled, and the number is very huge, 7 lakhs population, right? So they are, according to UNHCR, these population is being defined as stateless people. And what is the solution? The solution is not simple, but there is a solution. That is to repatriate these people back to their homelands. That is the solution. Not that they start demanding a homeland in Bangladesh where they are given shelter. So this is the framework of politics that I want to bring forth, because that will give better understanding of the situation. It is a responsibility of everyone sitting in this room to flag up this issue of repatriation in respect for human rights and demand for democratization of states where democracy is not there. Instead, the left liberals have hijacked and misunderstood the problem by putting a binary between people and resurrecting this whole idea of majority and minority, Christian and Hindu. This is unfortunate. So therefore, I think I don't want to represent Métis when I speak, because I belong to Métis community. It doesn't make sense that I should be always speaking for Métis. We have the right to speak from a perspective which we have been denied for long. And I have written on this also, that the whole structure of social sciences in India is represented by the mainstream people. And when we speak, we are either a Métis or a Kuki or a Naga. That's a very, very disheartening perspective that the mainstream universities have. And I have been speaking on this for quite some time. Now, so let me also remind you that the northeastern borderland is very fragile for the reason that there are ethnic groups which are in resistance for different reasons. On the other side of the border, you have Chin state, you have Sagaing division, you have Kachin, you have Arakan state. Now these states are filled with a lot of ethnic resistance movements. Unlike Burma, India doesn't recognize states in the name of ethnic groups. But in Burma, you have 2 types of states. One, state in the name of ethnic groups, like a Shan state, like a Chin state, like a Karen state, like a Kachin state, and you have across the border of Manipur, Sagaing division, which is a multi-ethnic state. So there are 2 types of states in Burma, ethnic state and multi-ethnic state. But this whole idea of having ethnic state in Myanmar probably has also influenced a segment of population in Manipur or in the northeast to demand for ethnic homelands, which is of course going to be creating overlapping conflicts. Because the whole idea of exclusive ethnic territoriality is not going to go well with an already established state like Manipur with a long history of state-making process. I would not normally prefer to use bigger words because audience being part of the NIAS, I am sure we are fairly acquainted with the very idea of nation. So therefore, I would like to prefer to use concepts like state-making process. And I want to remind the House today that Manipur, as a people, have been witness to a very huge state-making process for the last at least 2,000 years. And that's a very significant point to remember. The whole idea of resistance, the whole praxis of resistance that you see in the state of Manipur is rooted in that very history also. Because we take pride in the idea that we have gone through such a long history of state-making process which cannot be simply eradicated in a fraction of seconds. That is going to be causing a lot of problems. Now let me come back to that point. I will give you some evidence how and why Manipur stands very distinct. I have a lot of information to share with, to give a perspective to the problem that we are trying to understand. And before I get into that part, I'll come back to that particular book and the consequences aftermath. After that book, a lot of things have happened. First, historical writings have been changed. New nomenclatures have been established. Now let me come to the historical rewriting. From 1917 to 1919, there happened something called Boogie Rebellion. I'm not saying this. This is the archive speaking, the colonial archive speaking, the records speaking. This is also the nomenclature used by Kuki scholars till up to 1990. I can name a professor called Lalgan, who was a Kuki's renowned scholar. His book also uses this notion called rebellion. Once this book came out in 1998, and slightly before this book, this rebellion transformed into a war, Anglo-Kuki War. Now the point that I'm trying to raise is that these changes in the nomenclature of historical events are part of the larger politics of homeland. And let me remind you, the same author writes in 1990s, I repeat, the same author writes in 1990 that in this whole rebellion of the Kukis, 85 Kabui Nagas were killed. I have the photograph of that particular page. Now, when you are raiding your coexisting communities as adversaries and killing them, I think that could not be cited as a war against the British. And there are a lot of literature which has been produced, books after books that have been produced, glorifying this incident as an Anglo-Kuki war. The only point that I want to raise is that how could an Anglo-Kuki war end up killing fellow ethnic groups? This is a question mark I want to put before. So therefore, this whole ethnicization of relations has happened in the wake of an emergent greater homeland mobilization in these borderlands that has to be understood. I also want to bring you to a very interesting metaphor. As most of maybe knowing this book of nomads written by Anthony Sutton, he is of the view that the name of the book is Nomads, N-O-M-A-D-S. He's of the view that there is a natural possibility of a conflict between a population which are seemingly sedentary and a population which is seemingly free moving. I hope I have made sense there. I repeat, there is a possibility of a conflict between a population who claims to be free moving and a population who claims to be sedentary. And therefore, the history of having an established state-making process in Manipur and the apparent conflict with a particular community can be also understood from this perspective. Thus, the Jomia concept used by James Scott in his book is also creating problems because he argues that these uplanders called Jomia are state-scaping people. But if you look at the whole narrative of these uplanders in the region, since the colonial times, they have already been struggling either to be part of some state or to establish their own state. But having seen the kind of state formation in the borderland of India and Myanmar, I'm sure that these ethnic groups are already identified with some state or the other. However, the only problem is that the quality of the state in terms of democratic culture is a question. This, however, should not be a ground for victimizing the ethnic relationship, the ethnic tranquility in the state called Manipur. I have talked about the history part, the rise of ethnic movements, the India-Myanmar ethnicization politics. Now I will give you a couple of clues to that is going to be informed by empirical data. As you all know, we had a constitution in 1947.